When I come home from work, I'm usually coming home on the bike, pretty sweaty and out of breath, and take the bike through to the back, sit down, the kids bring me slippers, I'm brought dinner, and I just watch television, and that's my night. Actually, no, that is not that is not actually the case. It's challenging because I have two young kids, a 9-year-old and a 6-year-old, who are amazing and wonderful and gorgeous and very demanding, and also leave a lot of mess around the place. So actually, usually when I come home, it's usually a focus of doing, maybe an hour of housework, help Marianne out in the kitchen, or putting some clothes out on the line. I quite like doing most of that most of the time, but sometimes it's really stressful because I've got the day job. I work for a university, and universities these days are really bureaucratic institutions that require a lot of administration. They take up a lot of your headspace, and you come home to an environment that's also going berserk in its own domestic, lovely way, and there's a lot to do with that. And sometimes, after having helped out around the house and, done something, had dinner, sometimes it's then like 8:30, 9 o'clock, and the kids are going to bed, and I could write music for a couple of hours, and sometimes I do, but a lot of the time I don't, because I'm actually exhausted, and I'm probably good for falling asleep in front of the television and waking up the next morning and doing it all again. So writing music, it's a privilege, it's amazing, it's wonderful to be in the middle of it, but it is like diving into the deep end, and sometimes you just don't feel like doing it. Sometimes, because you know that you don't want to do it unless you're really going to give it 100%. So it's either all or it's nothing. Sometimes, quite frankly, it's just nothing. So composing is, in a lot of ways, a memory game. It's trying to arrange notes, chords, melodies, textures, sound in time, and it often begins with little bits. In the case of the piece I'm working on at the moment, I actually got the ideas sort of brewing for a week or two, and then on the bike ride into work, I work in at Melbourne Uni, I got some ideas for some chords, and particularly actually chords that were spaced out that had silence between them. And the idea with this was because it's a piece that's going to be done at the Melbourne Town Hall, featuring Symphonic Wind Band and the Melbourne Town Hall organ. So this is the start of the piece, the chords that I came up with, that was partly imagined on the bike, partly worked out at the piano, written down in the cafe, come home, plug it into the notation program, make a few further adjustments, listening back to it from the MIDI, and then maybe even then taking it back to the piano again and playing it and seeing how it sounds there. I really like the idea of working in multiple different ways, not just being chained to the desk. I really like trying material out in different ways until it feels centred and right. So you've just heard the sound of these chords from the computer MIDI, which is a really useful tool, but it's not a resonating sonic thing. It's an electronic approximation, I suppose, of what the real sounds in a real acoustic would sound like. So to be able to come to the piano and play the same harmonies and hear the same structures, but in a resonating way, is useful. I start to then take that sound and imagine then, what if that's played by a really big symphonic wind ensemble on the main stage of Melbourne Town Hall? What's my imagination telling me about what that then sounds like? So it's a constant process of comparison of different ways of thinking and hearing to try and assemble what you really think it's going to be like to listen to on the night. The piece opens with just E minor and then adds in other tones. It's a little bit chromatic, but it's very harmonically open, and that's pretty typical of my music generally. I guess a lot of composers worry about how modern one's music is, but I'm way past thinking about what other people might think my music sounds like. It's not that I don't care, I want people to like my music, but I've had to work out exactly what components of other people's music I was influenced by, absorb all of those things, analyse them, and then almost actually forget it, and then go back to a sort of a tabula rasa state where you just walk into a room and think, what sound do I want to hear? And so really now I'm driven by atmosphere and emotion and psychology. And if that means that it's E minor at the start, then so be it. So over the years, I guess I've now written quite a lot of music, over 170 pieces. Some of them are quite short, and at one stage of the piece I felt like I was maybe writing too many 5-minute pieces. I have no objection to that. I still write miniatures. I like all things, but it's probably also true that I've been increasingly interested in writing major works. I've written 2 symphonies, 2 operas. The operas were written in conjunction with my great collaborator and friend Ross Baglin. We met in a rock band when I was 18 called The Front, and we then morphed from writing pop songs into writing art song and choral pieces, and have written 2 operas. They're really important to me, and maybe I would write more depending on the circumstances. I've written 5 string quartets, 4 piano trios, and a number of sonatas, and I love what you can do with a major work. I love the idea both of getting deeper in for longer periods of time, connecting longer musical ideas. I think it's a really satisfying thing to do. And I love the opportunities that I've had also to be able to curate either a CD of particular parts of the repertoire. I did put out a CD recently, 800 Million Heartbeats, of my piano trio repertoire. I worked with a New Zealand group, great trio over there from Auckland called NZ Trio. That was a wonderful experience. And I also really like curating a concert, all of my own music. It's sometimes wonderful to be positioned next to Brahms or before Stravinsky. That's a lovely thing for a different reason. But I really like being able to get deeper into a single voice. And for that matter, I love going to concerts of my fellow composers when it's all just their music. I love to hear their music in that context too. It's like seeing a biopic on telly or at the movies. I love to get deep in with somebody's voice, whether it's somebody else's or my own. I grew up in a house in Canterbury that was a pretty big house, had 2 pianos in it. I've got an older brother, an older sister. My mum is a pianist, and she didn't teach any of us kids directly. We had lessons with other people, and I think from about when I was 10 years old I had oboe, guitar and piano lessons. And there was a lot of music around the house, and so it was a lovely way. It was just a natural, unforced environment. I wouldn't say that I was a regular practicer of music. My sight reading could be better. There's a lot of things that I wish I could do musically that were not exactly what I did as a kid. I played around a lot, especially with guitars. I actually made an electric guitar with my dad. I hassled and harried him for a number of years to say, buy me an electric guitar. And he actually, in the end, he actually bought me a book for Christmas, how to make an electric guitar. And he's into carpentry, and so we kind of did it together. He did more of it than I did, but we did it together, and that was a really cool thing too. When we plugged the guitar in, after we'd finished it and strung it up and plugged it into an amplifier, my dad could not believe that it worked. To this day, he still is amazed that we made something that actually worked. But it did work, and I played it in bands as a teenager, and I don't have that guitar anymore, but I've got a few pictures of it, and that was a wonderful thing. My mum worked at Burwood State College, that later became Victoria College and Deakin University, but I sometimes used to go back there after school, and that was great because that had harpsichords and electronic music studios and percussion gear, sack butts, weird stuff in storerooms that I didn't even know the name of what they were, but I'd pick them up and try and get a sound out of them. So that was a lovely thing too. So these things are sort of partly accidental. I guess a lot of it is to do with my mum being a musician, and I guess it was just natural for me to want to mess around with electronic music equipment and instruments. I really enjoyed that, and I actually guess I spent a lot of time doing that, even though I didn't practice a lot. I practiced, by the time I got to year 11, year 12, I practiced the oboe quite a lot because that was the instrument that I got into Melbourne Uni with, and my mum actually accompanied my final exams for that. That was a nice kind of family thing too. Great memories of that. I'm increasingly interested in writing major works, and probably the biggest of them is my first opera, Nelson. It's about the naval warlord from British times. In fact, it was the bicentenary of his death at Trafalgar recently, and that was part of when the piece was staged. The libretto was by Ross Baglin, my great collaborator, and it's a 3-act opera for a medium-sized cast and chorus, chamber orchestra. Took me actually on and off probably 10 years to write. At various points in time, I thought, I'm never going to finish this. This is too big, no one's going to do it. Why would you do that? It wasn't commissioned, but Ross really believed in the libretto, and I did too. I found it really emotional and confronting and amazing, and so at a certain point in time, I guess I got more than halfway through it, and at that point it was really then a compelling reason to say, well, now why wouldn't you finish it? So I did, and that was semi-staged in London in 2005, and in 2007 it was put on at Castlemaine State Festival, and that was a wonderful experience. I really loved seeing it on stage. That was really satisfying. A few years after Nelson had been staged in Castlemaine, I got an opportunity to write a children's opera. Richard Gill approached me through Victorian Opera to write a 1-hour, 1-act children's opera, which I actually called an opera for all ages. Again, the libretto was by Ross Baglin.
Every day the salaries pumped into the tray of seed. All I want is what I need in a parrot factory. Yes, we're glad.
It was an environmental story. It was a story about freedom and captivity, both literally in terms of the birds and the illicit parrot smuggling trade, and which really exists. It's dreadful. But it was really more of a metaphor about captivity and freedom and how we define that actually in our own lives personally. So it was on a literal and a metaphorical level. Both Ross and I wanted to write something that would be sort of fabulous and fantastic for kids, but that would also be engaging for adults. And so there are life-size parrots and birds running around the stage, and balloons that go up into the ceiling and fun stuff like that, but also really, again, confronting themes and things that make you think about your own life and the society you live in and what's going on around the world, things that really make you want to be engaged in a better world, however we can bring that about. What really drives me as a composer more than anything else is the idea of great listening experiences. That could be in concert. It could also be listening to something on headphones. It can happen in many different ways. Maybe even hearing somebody playing on the street can be a profound experience. But what are the great listening experiences? The listening experiences that draw you in, that elate you, that make you feel like you could jump up and touch the roof. The things that move you, the things that console you, all of these emotional and psychological things that are connected with the experience of listening to music. This is what I seek in other people's music, and therefore, I guess by extension, my own music, that's what I seek to create for myself as well. I love the opportunity to cook, and I've got a collection of red wine under the stairs. Not expensive red wine, but I love shopping for it. I love drinking it. I love sharing food and wine with friends. It's just a wonderful thing to do. It's lovely to take yourself outside of music. I kick the football with my son Axel. We love having kick-to-kick in the park. Giving piggybacks to my daughter Hannah and watching them both try and kill each other. No, actually, they really love each other, but you know how it is. They're siblings and they've got to eke out their space and territory in the world too. I love spending time with my wife, Marianne. It's great when we can come together artistically and work together, which we do sometimes. And just in general, it certainly is a wonderful thing to be able to have friends and a life that's not just the art and just the job. It's really important. My wife, Marianne Rothschild, is a violinist and she plays my music on a regular basis, sometimes with a duo that she's in with Glenn Riddle, piano. In 2000, I wrote Marianne a violin sonata. It's about 24 minutes long and we put it out on a disc mercurial, and that was a great project. That was the start of some of the extended chamber works also that I was writing around that time. I also wrote 3 pieces for Brisbane's Southern Cross Soloists, and Paul Dean, who was the artistic director of Southern Cross Soloists, was instrumental in commissioning those pieces. The first one was Mondrian Interiors, which I wrote in 2007, and that's based on works by Mondrian. There are actually 8 pictures of his from beginning toward the end of his career that I picked out, and I set each one as a kind of a miniature. And that was for oboe, clarinet, horn, bassoon, piano and solo harp. Marshall Maguire played the solo harp in that piece. I really enjoyed the colours of that ensemble, and the piece went really well and they toured it nationally. I think it's great when players play pieces more than once. They get deeper into it and there's more incentive for them also to put time into rehearsal if they know they're going to play it more than once. I think this is a big thing for composers, to be able to have collaborations with musicians who play the music on a regular basis. And so I then also wrote a piece, All Those Ways of Leaving, which was a set of interludes to go with a short story by Brisbane writer Nick Earls, and he did the reading at Bangalow Festival and also up in Brisbane. We did that twice, and that was really satisfying. And I wrote a second chamber concerto for Southern Cross Soloists with Marshall Maguire again on harp, Slava Gregorian on guitar, and also Jack Lebec, the British violinist. And that was a really satisfying work to be able to write too. So it was lovely to write a sequence of 3 works for that group. And I'm definitely interested not only in writing major works, but in developing collaborations with performers who get used to how your music sounds in performance practice, because I try to notate everything as exactly as I can in the score. I try to be meticulous, but actually you can't say everything in a score, and you have to live with that as a composer, the fact that your music can be interpreted in different ways. And some of those variations are great, but sometimes they actually take you outside of the idiom that is your performance practice. So anytime you can work with an ensemble or a musician across a sequence of pieces or a sequence of performances, I think it's a great thing. It's really crucial, actually.